Hi, my name is Todd Kyle. I'm the Vice Chair of the Canadian Federation of Library Associations, la Fédération canadienne des associations de bibliothèques. This is an update on what is happening at CFLA as of September 2019. First, what is CFLA? Our vision is that CFLA FCAB is the united voice of Canada's libraries. Our mission is to influence public policy, to advance library excellence, and to raise the visibility of libraries in Canada to advance our national intellectual, social, economic, and cultural success. CFLA does a lot of its work through the work of volunteer committees made up of representatives across Canada and from various library sectors. One of the committees that we have is the Committee on Cataloging and Metadata Standards. This is a committee that advises the board to develop and promote its libraries community's positions on cataloging and metadata standards and issues. One of the interesting things that this committee has worked on recently has been this joint task force mentioned right here on BibFrame readiness. BibFrame is a new linked data standard for library cataloging. Of course, CFLA also has a copyright committee. The Copyright Committee advises the board on matters of national and international copyright policy and advocacy, has been very active recently with the ongoing review of the Copyright Act by the federal government. And some of the issues that we are involved in, that we have developed position statements on and have advocated on, are listed right here, including fair dealing, Indigenous knowledge, and CUSMA, which is of course the potential successor to NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which will have some implications for extending copyright. We have a committee on Indigenous matters that follows on the work of our previous Truth and Reconciliation Committee. This committee works with Indigenous people to address issues related to libraries and other kinds of memory institutions. And most importantly, it promotes initiatives in all types of libraries to advance meaningful reconciliation. One of the things that this committee has been involved in recently is organizing a meeting on the creation of NICLA, the National Indigenous Knowledge and Language Alliance, which is a library and memory institution pan-Canadian advocacy organization that has just recently gotten underway. We have a committee as well on intellectual freedom. The committee advocates for the value of intellectual freedom in Canada and develops policies and guidelines. One of the most important things that they do in terms of activities is run the long-standing challenges survey, which is now available throughout the year online to report challenges as they happen. An article will soon be appearing in the Freedom to Read journal, which will detail what we have learned through the survey in the last year. CFLA, of course, is very active in federal advocacy, and that includes during the upcoming federal election campaign to be held on October 21st. So we have been working with a government relations firm to develop some messaging that we will share with all parties to prepare them to deal with library issues. Our basic message is going to be that equitable access to the knowledge economy enables Canada's growth. The first pillar in our election campaign will be advancing social infrastructure. So we are recommending that the government commit $800 million over the next 4 years to support a targeted library upgrade investment fund. So this is mostly a matter of library infrastructure, and that is library infrastructure of all types. You might notice in the briefs that are shown here for the upcoming federal election that we have these symbols here. These are because we have made quite an effort to connect the efforts of CFLA and of libraries to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is also an effort being made internationally by the International Federation of Library Association, which, by the way, CFLA is Canada's representative at that level. The second pillar in our federal elections campaign relates to Indigenous ways of knowing and of language preservation. So we are asking the government to commit to supporting ways of preserving Indigenous knowledge, recognizing its intellectual property, and also preserving the languages of Indigenous people in Canada. Of course, we are also concentrating on copyright for the federal election campaign. It's a message that we're looking for a balanced and fair copyright regime regarding some of the same issues that we mentioned before. And the final pillar is on support for accessible formats. So we have had some success in the past lobbying the government to continue funding for initiatives such as CELA, the Center for Equitable Library Access, and NNELS, the National Network for Equitable Library Services. And this builds on that by asking the government to continue sustainable funding. And CFLA has been quite active with a national committee of many stakeholders in looking at how we can expand the access to accessible materials for all Canadians. CFLA FCAB is about to launch its 3-year strategic plan, its first strategic plan, which is titled Stronger Together at Advancing the Impact of Libraries. And this was developed over the last year with extensive consultation with stakeholders and will cover the next 3 years and hopefully focus CFLA's efforts and allow us to expand. Objective 1 in our strategic plan is to amplify the influence and impact of libraries in national and international public policy. Objective 2 is to develop and monitor national policies and guidelines to advance library excellence. Objective 3 is to raise the visibility of libraries as contributors to Canadian intellectual, social, and cultural life. Here's where we specifically mention benchmarking Canadian libraries according to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Objective 4 is to develop a sustainable organization to effectively support our vision and mission. This is a particularly important goal for CFLA because we are only 3 years old, entering our 4th year, and as a young organization, we have to concentrate on the health of that organization. Governance is a very important objective here. Engaging and collaborating with our members and with the community is very important. Particularly important over the next short while is building stable revenue. CFLA is funded by the member organizations based on a number of factors. They contribute varying amounts based on things like their own budgets, the size of their organizations. The 3 biggest contributors are the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, CARL, the Canadian Urban Libraries Council, CULC, and Ontario Library Association, OLA. And going forward, the way we are going to build that revenue includes creating new membership categories, expanding the membership, and possibly looking at new categories of ways for organizations in our broad stakeholder community to join us as supporters. In recent weeks, we've had a considerable increase in the contributions pledged to us by the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, and that is going to hopefully allow us going forward to hire a full-time executive director. CFLA has not had a full-time executive director. At the moment, we have Catherine McColgan, who works for us 4 days out of 5 on a secondment arrangement from CARL. But going forward, in order to build the organization, we feel that a full-time executive director is very important. So we are embarking on a recruitment process for that and making sure that the revenue will be in place in order to support that expenditure. We're also looking to expand the amount of administrative support we have from the current 8 to 10 hours per week to considerably more than that. CFLA FCAB is an advocacy organization. It's very important that we concentrate on advocacy. And most of our advocacy is on national or international library issues that cross library sectors or that are in the broad interest of Canadians. There are times that we do some advocacy work or some comment on issues that are more local, provincial, and territorial, but it's important that we recognize that we do that only when we are invited by our member associations and where we believe that a national voice would be valuable. Another recent activity has been our submission to the 2020 federal budget consultations. Some of these you may have seen before from the federal election that we just talked about, including the $800 million for library infrastructure, some money to support Indigenous knowledge and protocols education in library services, and as well, something that we hadn't mentioned before in this presentation is our support for funding for digitizing content in Canada's rich documentary heritage, so the National Heritage Digitization Strategy that we want to support. Some of the recent accomplishments of CFLA are related to the review of the Copyright Act. So the parliamentary committee that is looking at that review has actually taken some of CFLA's advice in recommending the preservation of fair dealing, protections for Indigenous knowledge. There's been some good discussions about removing Crown copyright. In terms of federal budgets recently, there's been some success in our voice being heard on a number of things where money has been committed. For example, for the Library and Archives Canada Ottawa Public Library joint facility, the funding, as we mentioned, for CELA, funding for Indigenous languages, and we're hoping to continue that success. Again, being involved in the founding of NICLA was important to us, and increasing our revenues so that we can allow the hiring of full-time ED and more administrative support is also something that we consider an accomplishment. So what does the future hold? Well, one of the most important things that we'd like everybody to be ready for is for our next national forum. This will be the second national forum that CFLA has held, building on the success of our forum in Regina, Saskatchewan in 2018. The next forum will be held in Winnipeg as part of the Manitoba Libraries Conference on April 8th, 2020. The topics include Indigenous matters and intellectual freedom. We certainly hope to see you in Winnipeg next year, particularly exciting because 2020 is the 100th anniversary of Manitoba joining Confederation. Thank you very much for joining me today. If you have any questions, you can email Catherine McColgan or get in touch with me. My name is Todd Kyle.